So the main ingredient for today's recipe is the Nel Prime, a prime variant of the Nel which has improved stats. It has enhancements to damage, critical chance, critical multiplier, and status chance, at the expense of slower reload speed. But it offers the same mechanic wherein there's a special buff called Death Knell that additively increased the modded critical multiplier by 0.5 times and modded status chance by 20% and stacks up to 3 times, and also increases ammo efficiency by 100% that can turn the pistol into an infinite bullet hose gun. The buff lasts 2 seconds and can be refreshed on subsequent headshots. But before we get into the details on how to have a 100% red crit headshot with the Nel Prime, I would just like to discuss first that this prime weapon is pretty solid in Eidolon hunting. It can melt the limbs and the Eidolons themselves in seconds. The Death Knell buff can proc once you shot the heads of Terrorist, Cantylist, and Hydralist, and I'm happy to inform you that Nel Prime is not just a good option for Eidolon hunting, but a superb one when it comes to dealing the most damage to achieve the shortest capture time as much as possible. It breaks the Eidolon literally in seconds, and mind you, the build I was using for this Eidolon hunt is not maxed out yet. Also, I haven't used anything like Volt Shields to further boost the damage, and only took care of the 3 Eidolons using the basic solo setup for Tridolon hunting, which is Trinity with the Eclipse subsume ability. This was the build I was using to hunt down all 3 Eidolons, and it wouldn't be a waste of extra forma if you decide to give it more mods like damage or even fire rate. Just a quick tip though, add a V polarity when you want to add more forma on this one to make the build more universal, and you can replace it with mods intended for star chart mission plays. In this setup, you can add another damage mod in the form of Augur Pact if you wish to go for forma in Eidolon hunting with an Nel Prime, and that is enough to take down all Eidolons. Honestly speaking, Nel Prime felt like the best alternative to capturing all Eidolons other than using your Necromeshs, or what I often refer to as Cornbots. Void Rig, in my opinion, is the best damage dealer against Eidolons right now if you don't have a good gun with a Riven, but the problem with using Void Rig is that you need to farm mods in Railjack missions, which I know most new players can't do right now. Nel Prime is a great alternative as it's only a Mastery 14 pistol, and you can buy it from other players in the market or farm for its part via relics. But Squad Leader, the Nel death buff only applies for 2 seconds. Yes, it may sound short, but in my opinion, it's enough to land a headshot to the Eidolon and then proceed to dismantle its limbs. Anyway, after destroying all limbs, you can just focus on its head in its vulnerable phase to finish it off. Right now, I can say that it is one of the best Eidolon hunting weapons that can also be turned into a good and fun weapon overall, as it's only viable for normal and high level plays in star chart missions. So, the Death Knell buff only procs when you land a headshot on an enemy, and it only refreshes when you land consecutive headshots. I know what you are thinking, you got to be pretty accurate with this weapon to land those red crit headshots, right Squad Leader? Not exactly. When we consider the most basic combo for the Nel Prime, we then see the Harrow Prime access. There are actually 2 of them that can make Nel Prime hitting heads easy, Harrow Prime and the Scourge Prime. Harrow has his Condemn ability that stun-locked targets for easier headshots. The best part is, the position of enemies after being hit by Condemn is perfect, totally leaving the heads vulnerable, and it feels like the enemies are saying "hit me in the head daddy." Next is the Scourge Prime's Alternate Fire. Its alternate fire throws the Scourge, dealing damage and causing a 2-meter bullet attractor field on the heads of enemies near the impact point, allowing easier headshots with secondary weapons. If you want to check out a detailed guide on how Scourge Prime can be a devastating spear gun other than just a utility, then go check out my guide, which I have provided the link at the pinned comment. There's also the case of Mag's Bubble that allows you to proc headshots, but the problem is, it's unreliable since sometimes, the Death Knell buff will stop working since there are not enough enemies getting headshot inside the bubble. Most likely, you will need to deactivate the bubble and recast it again to group lots of enemies. Other grouping abilities work, like Ensnare, as it binds targets for easier headshots, but not as effective as Harrow's Condemn since enemies are tightly grouped together. Right now, of all the things I have mentioned, only Harrow and Scourge Prime provides a reliable way to do some headshot and continually proc the Death Knell buff of this Prime pistol, but we are looking for 100% guaranteed headshot here, turning the Nel Prime into a red crit status monster that is also an infinite bullet hose. To do this, we must tap into the power of the Helminth system, and borrow the power of the broken Warframe called Xata's Whisper. This ability has the same effect as the Scourge Prime's alternate fire, but only better since 1. The range of Xata's Whisper is not absolute, and you can always turn around and fire into an enemy to proc those bullet attractors. Also, when enemies have the Xata's Whisper's debuff, they are prone to headshots, and this allows the death knell buff to be active every time as long as Xata's Whisper is active. It's completely broken that you can turn Zephyr into a fighter aircraft that has infinite ammunition, shredding everything while in the air. Okay, before we begin to discuss the synergy, let me show you first how I mod my Nell Prime for Star Chart mission. I would suggest that you go full galvanized build for the Nell Prime. Galvanized diffusion allows for more bullets. Galvanized crosshairs gives you more critical chance, which pairs perfect with creeping bullseye. This build alone will give your Nell Prime orange crits, but if you want to get to those red crit numbers, then you will need a crit chance ribbon for that. If you don't have any, then don't worry, as you can still red crit with this pistol without a ribbon. Moving on, galvanized shot is also good because, despite the fact that Nell Prime only has 10% status chance on its stat, that can be increased with the death knell buff, which always procs every time. Having galvanized shot on your build, plus these 2 dual status chance mods will give your Nell Prime 30% status chance, and then it will be added with 20% and stacks up to 3 times when the death knell buff procs. You can say that this pistol is also a deadly status gun, since it can also be modded with fire rate. The more fire rate, the faster you also proc status, and the faster you kill enemies that way with galvanized shot in your build. Lastly, I would like to recommend using secondary Deadhead instead of the secondary Merciless Arcane. This arcane is preferable since it doesn't only gives you bonus damage that secondary Merciless can give, but also headshot damage multiplier and minus 50% weapon recoil, which the Nell Prime needs to boost its damage and maintain the death knell buff. Moving on, let's talk about the Zephyr synergy. Nell Prime, with the build I have shown you, will red crit with Zephyr while she is on the air because her passive allows you to gain 150% critical chance bonus. That would give the Nell Prime the ability to red crit, allowing Zephyr to be very dangerous while in the air. For the build, you can put anything you want. This is just a trial build though, and what I tried here is to put as duration as possible so I can see how long can I keep the Nell Prime from doing red critical hits and infinite bullet while in the air. I'm happy to say that it's super busted, and you can keep the death knell buff with Zephyr while Xata's Whisper is active. Also, there's another way to red crit with Nell Prime and keep the bullet hose effect, and that is by using a tank Warframe, then subsuming Xata's Whisper, and equipping the Arcane Avenger. This arcane in the hands of a tank, like in Arrows, allows it to proc every time, and in return, it allows you to keep the death knell buff when your Xata's Whisper is active. So, that's all about it. I hope that you find this video informative. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to help our channel grow. Thank you so much for watching. Squad Leader signing off.